morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to our congressional briefing this morning. I'd like to welcome the member of the press and leaders of the Iranian-American communities. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this pivotal congressional briefing. On behalf of Organization of Iranian-American Communities, I welcome all of you. We are here to really discuss a transformative shift in the United States approach towards Iran, a bipartisan effort that has acknowledged a clear and a resolute call by the Iranian people for regime change, a call that is both urgent and compelling now that the head of the snake in Tehran has been exposed with the recent development in the Middle East. I think without further ado, we're going to be starting our program this morning with a message from Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Please welcome Mrs. Rajavi.
Honorable representatives, dear friends, good morning. I would like to express my gratitude to Congressman Randy Weber and your other bipartisan colleagues for organizing this meeting. I also wish to commend the valuable initiative of the representatives in introducing a new resolution in the House of Representatives. This resolution offers a correct solution to the Iranian problem as well as supporting the PMI members at Ashraf Tree. Recent escalation of the regime's warmongering and its drone attacks in this weekend are a turning point which proves, first, the head of snake of warmongering is in Tehran. Second, it showed that this regime is the principal side of the war. And third, as the Iranian resistance has emphasized repeatedly, the overthrow of this regime by the people of Iran and the Iranian resistance is essential for peace in the region. By warmongering, Khamenei is attempting to divert attention from the terrible situation of the regime within Iran. But the regime has received blows one after another. He wanted to use the sham election of last month to cover up the growing social discontent. But with the widespread elections boycott by the people, he failed. Khamenei and his regime have also failed confronting the increasing anger and protests of the Iranian people. In recent months, young rebels have targeted the regime's facilities and oppressive authorities. Khamenei's recent measures highlights several issues that are the result of the regime's critical situation. These measures are: he ordered the judiciary to intensify the repression of women, to enforce mandatory hijab laws. He has urged regime agents in universities to keep a watch on students and increase their repression. By referring to the government in the region as enemies of his regime, Khamenei has openly threatened not to allow them to govern. Finally, he has declared the IRGC's proxy forces in the region as one of the most vital issues that should be made stronger more and more day by day. To avoid being overthrown, Khamenei executed at least 864 people in 2023. It's time for everyone to open their eyes to the real solution, as well the same solution that you honorable representatives have offered in your new bipartisan resolution. In the 2022 uprising, the people of Iran expressed their desire to reject all forms of dictatorship, whether it be the Shah or the mullahs. Therefore, the NCRI's aim is to establish a democratic republic. The only solution to prevent the regime from obtaining an atomic bomb is the overthrow of the regime by the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance. For many years, we warned that appeasement would lead to war. Today, a war that we could avoid has put on fire the Middle East. Now, appeasing this regime means submitting to the mullahs' warmongering and nuclear ambitions. This is what you, the representatives of the American people and the European people's representatives, have warned about, but unfortunately, the Western governments continued this policy. It is time for Khamenei and his regime to be accountable for 40 years of warmongering. The policy of appeasement must be ended. The urgent and necessary measures to be adopted include the use of the snapback mechanism to revive the UN Security Council's resolutions against Mullah's regime's nuclear program and imposing comprehensive sanctions against this regime. Today, the clerical regime is confronted with the most significant and fundamental threat to its existence, that is the determination of the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the regime alongside the presence of an organized resistance capable of leading this struggle to victory. Now is the right moment for the solution outlined in your resolution as the official policy of the U.S. and Europe towards Iran. I thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Rajavi. And indeed, the policy that's been outlined in the resolution, a bipartisan resolution that's been introduced today, is actually what is recommended for U.S. government and Europe. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Congressman Randy Weber, a man who is behind the effort that we're announcing today, the House Resolution 1148. Please welcome Congressman Weber.
Wow. She said it, didn't she? 40 years of terror. Isn't it about time that it ends? About time that it ends, you betcha. Well, good morning, freedom-loving Iranians and fellow patriots. I know many of you have heard me speak before, but today I'm particularly happy to be here with y'all as we take another great step, giant step, we say in Texas, forward to a fight against the tyrannical regime in Tehran. For decades, we have suffered under the regimes of the Ayatollahs who have reveled, absolutely reveled in destabilizing the Middle East. Madam Rajavi talked about that, quite frankly. They are intentionally spreading chaos throughout not just that region, but I would add the world, in fact. Over this last weekend, we saw their evil intent on full display this time. Instead of hiding behind their proxies, which they have used for years, Iran directly attacked Israel from its sovereign territory. Ladies and gentlemen, this is totally unprecedented. Totally unprecedented. This was manifestly an outright act of war. So the timing in our resolution is most fortuitous. I'm proud to have introduced this resolution along with 145 United States representatives both Republicans and Democrats alike. Can we give them a hand? See, we Republicans and Democrats can work together. So let me tell you, we are condemning the Iranian regime's internal suppression of its own citizenry, its sponsorship of global terrorism, and its involvement in what heretofore has been called regional proxy wars. But they've come out and they're doing the attacking themselves. For far too long, the people of Iran have endured the oppressive rule of a regime that has absolutely disregarded their basic human rights and stifled those aspirations for freedom and democracy that live and dwell in the hearts of people everywhere. The Iranian people have shown, absolutely have shown time and time again, that they yearn for a brighter future where they can enjoy the fundamental rights and freedoms that all individuals deserve. So, the Iranian regime started, it's ironic, I guess, the Iranian regime started sham trials in absentia of some 104 veteran members of the Iranian resistance who are primarily based in Europe, including in France and Albania, to create a phony, all of this to create a phony legal precedent against them and then have them extradited to Iran or to justify terror plots against them and their families. I tell you what, this ignominious regime's survival hinges on its oppressive domestic policies and its international terror campaigns. And we're intent on that regime not surviving. Are y'all with me? We don't want them to survive. The anti-government protests sparked by the death of one Masha Amini. By the way, I think she was 22 years old. September, she would have been 23, this coming September. It underscores, the anti-government protest sparked by her death absolutely underscores the Iranian people's desires for freedom away from tyrants that would do such a thing as that. The involvement of Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi in numerous atrocities, both past and present, including the 1988 massacre and the suppression of 2019 and 2022, cannot be ignored. They only further highlight this regime's brutality. These tyrants, as y'all all know, routinely, systematically, and arbitrarily suppress ethnic and religious minorities, including Iranian Kurds, Baluchis, or Arabs, Christians, Jews, and even Sunni Muslims. They don't discriminate against anybody. They get them all. They go after everybody. They deprive everybody of their fundamental human rights, often culminating in execution. So, I applaud all those who are demanding an end to the totalitarian regime and seeking a form of governance that derives its legitimacy from the people, not from basically an unelected single party. Y'all agree? I need y'all to agree. So we recognize a future as envisioned by the National Council of Resistance, and we applaud the leadership of Ms. Maryam Rajavi. Now, let me ask y'all a question. I was over there last year. I got to meet with her personally. How many in here have actually gotten to meet with her? A few of y'all have. She's the real deal. She's determined. She's what Iran needs. Are we going to stick with her? Come on. Following Ms. Rajavi's lead, the resistance 10-point plan for the future of Iran calls, as y'all all know, for the universal right to vote, free elections, a market economy, and it advocates gender, religious, and ethnic equality with a foreign policy based on peaceful coexistence with a non-nuclear Iran. That we can't stand for. So to ensure that we don't have to send our soldiers to Iran to confront the regime's terror campaign, the right policy is for us, the United States, and nations everywhere to support the uprising daughters and sons and the resistance units in Iran to bring about regime change themselves. Y'all with me? Come on. Now, more than ever, we need to stand, the world needs to stand with the Iranian people against this tyrannical regime as Iranians seek for freedom. We need to stand with them. We condemn the godless mullahs who symbolizes the head of the snake of war and terror, the snake of war and terror. The escalating turmoil in the Middle East, particularly since October the 7th, 2023, demands immediate action. The rogue regime needs to be overthrown immediately. Truth of the matter is, it should have been overthrown a long time ago. We missed an opportunity in 2009. We missed some other opportunities. The rogue regime should have been done away with a long time ago. Now, more than ever, the United States must support the freedom-loving citizens of Iran who have spent decades and not a little spilled blood, in fact, death, who have spent decades, their own blood and their own lives, trying to eject these murderers, get them out of power in Tehran. So I know all of y'all know that. I just want to say thank you all for being here. I want to say thank you to all of our colleagues who have co-sponsored this important resolution. I'm going to leave today with this thought. Stay the course. Stay the course. Let us never waver from the goal of a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Congressman Weber. We really appreciate your leadership. And as you said, the House Resolution 1148, bipartisan, introduced today, really outlines the right policy on Iran. So right now, it's my great pleasure to introduce another amazing leader in U.S. Congress, a visionary leader who has been on the issue of Iran policy since day one. Please welcome Congressman Tom McClintock.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for your unswerving devotion to the cause of liberty in Iran. The events of October 7th were a jarring reminder of the ruthlessness, the barbarity, and the inhumanity of the forces that are arrayed and organized and financed by the illegitimate and criminal regime in Tehran. And the events of the past week warn us that the Iranian regime is becoming bolder and more reckless by the day. No longer hiding behind its puppets, the puppet master has now come out from behind the curtains. Fortunately, the incompetence of the mullahs is equal to their malice, and their massed attack on Israel's civilians was effectively brushed away. Not so easy to brush away is their oppression of their own people. And it's the people of Iran who need our help to rid themselves and the world of this malignant dictatorship. Every day this regime goes on, the threat to the safety and security of the entire region increases. And this threat will continue until the mullahs are overthrown and brought to justice for their crimes against humanity. When I first introduced House Resolution 100 back in 2022, I joined Iranian Americans and dozens of my bipartisan colleagues to highlight this reality. As Congressman Weber said, the head of the snake is Tehran. This resolution recognizes this simple fact and expresses support for the Iranian people's desire to rid themselves of it and to establish a democratic, free, secular, prosperous, and non-nuclear republic. Within just a few months of introducing this measure, a bipartisan majority of the U.S. House of Representatives joined not merely as sponsors, or supporters, I should say, but as co-sponsors. That's a profound statement of the strong support of the Iranian resistance has among the people of the United States. And now we have House Resolution 1148 calling for holding this criminal regime accountable for its actions through the continued imposition of sanctions and to support the Iranian resistance's 10-point plan for the future of Iran. The sham trials that Congressman Weber referenced, these trials in absentia of some of the veteran members of the Iranian resistance are literally the tools of tyrants. And they say volumes not only about the injustice of this regime, but of its insecurity as well. The free world must recognize that the people of Iran want this regime gone in its entirety. To help them, the United States has to adopt two policies outlined by former Secretary of State Michael Pompeo at a meeting with Ms. Maryam Rajavi just hours before the October 7th attack occurred in the Middle East. First, the United States must put maximum pressure on the regime in Tehran. This means that it must stop offering this regime additional capital. It also means that the administration must enforce fully all of the sanctions required by U.S. law. And the United States must refrain from actively undermining the Iranian opposition. Second, the United States government must provide maximum political and moral support to the people of Iran and adopt the steps outlined by measures such as House Resolutions 100, 627, and now 1148. When President Biden releases money to Iran or relaxes sanctions, he is funding the very terrorist operations directed against the Iranian people, the people of Israel, and someday soon, I'm afraid, against the people of the United States. Today, America must stand with the victims of the Iranian dictatorship and its proxies. And we must send long overdue assistance to Israel, which is fighting an external war with Iran and its proxies, just as we should send long overdue assistance to the Iranian resistance, which is fighting an internal war against that very same regime. A war for their freedom, their dignity, their heritage, their prosperity, and their future. The Iranian resistance has waged this fight for years. They know what it's like to live under this oppressive dictatorship, and they deserve the support and the thanks of the people of the free world for everything they are doing to rid themselves and rid the world of their tormentors. Through our resolutions, the people of the United States express that support, but we must also back that moral support with material support if it's going to matter, and we need to do that soon. Thank you all again for being here. God bless you. God bless the people of Iran and the cause of liberty.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman McClintock. Your leadership has been incredible in U.S. Congress in guiding the U.S. policy on Iran. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Congressman Lance Gooden, who also have met Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. Please welcome Congressman Gooden, another co-sponsor of House Resolution 1148.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all so much, and thank you for the work you're doing for your fellow citizens back home in Iran and for the continued fighting. I'm seeing faces in this crowd that I've seen before, and I've heard the stories, and I've heard your experiences and some very terrifying and sad, tragic stories. And I want you to know that the United States Congress is on your side. We are on the side of the people of Iran, and we support the people of Iran who are fighting for a free Iran against this horrific regime that has done so much damage to its citizens at home and abroad. Specifically, I want to talk about your fellow citizens in Ashraf 3 in Albania and other citizens throughout Europe who are being persecuted by this regime. I realize that they have started some sham trials in Tehran recently, just in the last few days. These are not real. This is all an effort to cause trouble for those in Ashraf 3. We know that they have infiltrated members of the Albanian government and have worked against your citizens there. And I am working along with my colleague to my right and all of us in Congress to fight back against that. We are working with our friends in Albania, hoping that they will do the right thing and stand up for those Iranian citizens who have sought refuge in Albania at Ashraf 3. The last time I was in Albania, I got to tour the facilities there, and I got to visit with Madam Rajavi, and we had some very difficult conversations and very special moments with the people there that had been through so much, and you know many of them. And I just want to reaffirm my support for Madam Rajavi's 10-point plan for peace and security in Iran. I do believe that great days are ahead for the people of Iran. We all know what's happened in the last few days, and there probably will be more to come. And this is a very important time for your friends and family members in Iran. I want you to know that I and my colleagues across the aisle and on the Republican side are continuing to work to fight to bring peace and a free and stable state to the people there. We've got to continue to support your friends and family back home that are working to topple this government and bring much-needed change. I especially want to talk to the young people in Iran and say, continue your fight against this regime. They do not care about you. They only care about power. And I encourage the young people of Iran to continue to be brave and fight against this regime and fight for your countrymen and do the right thing. We in the United States support you from all levels of government to all levels of the citizenry. We do support the good people of Iran, and we share our commitment to your cause for a free and prosperous state. I thank you all so much. Thank you, Madam Rajavi, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Congressman Gooden. As you said, the fight for a free, non-nuclear, secular republic Iran goes on, and the support in U.S. Congress is becoming more and more empowering for the people of Iran. The bipartisan effort that is currently underway underscores a commitment to a non-military avenues to support, emphasizing that United States must morally and politically back those who are seeking freedom and democracy in Iran. It also highlights the necessity of protecting the Iranian political refugee in Ashraf 3, just as Congressman Lance Gooden mentioned, and also Congressman McClintock and Congressman Weber. Those who are really have paid the highest price for freedom and continue to face great threat by the Iranian regime. As we proceed with today's briefing, we will really focus on the profound impact on this bipartisan resolution, which aims to achieve fostering a future with Iranian people that can freely determine their own future and destiny for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Iranian republic. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, Congressman Steve Cohen, also co-chair of Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus. Please welcome Congressman Cohen.
Thank you so much. Only could be recognized like this everywhere in Memphis. The situation in Iran has been critical for some time. And that's why many of us support the resolution to help see that Iran becomes free and democratic. What we've seen over the weekend with Iran's actions against Israel are indicative of what Iran is today. Iran is a country that wants to become the country in the Middle East. The Iranian leadership has goals that are similar to Putin's goals in Europe. They want to expand their reach and their power and impose their philosophy and their thought patterns on everyone in the region. Israel, of course, is anathema to Iran because they're democratic, because they're Jewish. It sets up a conflict. They shot 300 or more missiles and drones at Israel. Yes, there was limited damage. The 7-year-old girl, Bedouin girl, who was hit by shrapnel or some other form of debris, is fighting for her life. That shouldn't have happened. And the fact that the Israelis and the Americans and the Brits, and I think the Jordanians as well, were so effective in stopping the attack does not minimize the attack. The attack was intended to kill lots of 7-year-old girls and 71-year-old men and 35-year-old women and 86-year-old men. It was aimed at killing Israelis. Now, true, some of the missiles were fired at military installations, but there are people there too. But some of them were right over Jerusalem. And the mosque that's there could have been damaged or destroyed. So they're reckless, even with their own symbols of history and religion. It is a reckless country. So I'm proud to stand with this group that's fighting for a free and independent Iran. It is a non-nuclear Iran that respects others and operates in a democratic fashion. So to my Iranian American friends here, thank you for being here and for your unwavering support in your fight for democracy and human rights. Iran can and should live again. Before 1979, Iran was a friend of Israel. Iran was a friend of the free world. It's not the Iranian people. It's this rogue group that came in and took hostages from American hostages and set off an effort to defeat the president at the time, President Carter, and hold hostages and release them and making a deal with the Republicans and putting Reagan in. They've gotten no better. They won't get better. They've got to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman Cohen. It is my great pleasure to also introduce another amazing leader in U.S. Congress, Congressman Brad Sherman, who has been with the Iranian American community through the thick and thin. Please welcome Congressman Sherman.
I want to stand here. I don't want to stand. Okay, that's great. Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I am proud to be standing next to my friend Steve Cohen, and I'm proud that I brought my daughter, Molly Sherman, the next generation of Americans who will be dedicated to a friendly and democratic Iran. Some of you saw her at the big demonstration in front of the State Department several years ago. A few of us had dinner just a few nights ago. And if I have a daughter who's as dedicated to democracy in Iran as Molly, I must be doing something right as a parent. I am pleased to be the chief Democrat on H.R. 100, which calls for a secular, democratic, non-nuclear Republic of Iran.
I've got it. Okay, thank you. I run my office too.
And we have 243 co-sponsors. The people in this room are aware of the crimes committed by this regime. I'm actually going to tell you one crime that you don't even know about or haven't focused on. But it is amazing to see that such a great people with such a great history have, for this short period of time of several decades, been subject to such a bad and criminal regime. Now, the crime you don't know, that you don't focus on, is what they have done with the Houthi. You realize that they've strangled the Red Sea. But what the media doesn't tell you is that food going to places in East Africa particularly is blocked by that. Major food exporters include Ukraine and Russia, and that food has to come down the Red Sea. And when that food is more expensive because it has to go all the way around Africa, well, if food's more expensive for us, we have to pay more for shredded wheat. And we do, and we're upset about it. But when food is more expensive in northern Ethiopia, people try to get by on one meal a day, and many of them die. And there are tens of thousands of people who will die as a result of what the Houthi have done to our efforts to move food around the world. Now, we saw just a couple days ago, this regime sent 300 drones, rockets, ballistic missiles toward Israel. And the world united against this regime and shot them down. But they are morally responsible not only for what they did, which is to send a poor Arab Israeli girl to the hospital where we pray for her recovery, but they are morally responsible for what they tried to do, to kill thousands of Israelis in the middle of the night. And they do so in response to the fact that Israel hit a military headquarters with two top generals plotting the death of thousands of Israeli civilians. And for this, the Iranian regime says it should defend its sacred embassy. I remember this regime in the late 1970s, and they didn't seem to think that embassies were sacred. They put the whole world in a vice by holding over 50 American hostages. And today they have done it again by sending 300 missiles. But what they've done to their own people is far worse. That's why I'm pleased to have joined with Randy Weber and so many others in introducing H.R. 1148 to condemn two things: this regime's brutal suppression of its own people and its regional proxy war in support for the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, and those are just the terrorist organizations that begin with the letter H. This regime has, in just the last couple of years, been responsible for 5,000 deaths. We've seen the executions of Mohammed Hubatu and Farad Salami. And we saw the death of Masa Jina Amini, a little girl, or not a little, a young woman who inspired the world. So we have a lot to do. The Iranian people have shown the world for thousands of years what they can do in freedom. In Los Angeles, roughly 1 million Iranian Americans have shown what they can do right in California. And over 2,000 years ago, we saw the first human rights document, the Cyrus Cylinder. So I look forward to working with you, as I have for my 28 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, for a secular, democratic, non-nuclear Republic of Iran. And such an Iran would be a friend to the United States and a blessing to the Middle East. Thank you very much. I'm Brad Sherman.
Thank Thank you so much, Congressman Sherman. We are so proud to have such an amazing and strong bipartisan support in U.S. Congress. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, Congressman Pete Sessions, who has joined us today. Please welcome Congressman Sessions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome to Capitol Hill. The opportunity for you to take part in today's expression of a bipartisan support not only for you, but to aim the effort at the Iranian leadership, not at the Iranian people. The Iranian people want, need, and pray for and work for not only freedom and opportunity, but for them to become, instead of the effort by their leadership to kill them and to mask them and to stop them from the freedom that is God-given to them. But more importantly, we gather together as Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan, to say that we agree with you. Your role today is very important. It's not just to gather information, but rather to gather the strength of being together with you, each other. And for the last probably 20 years, I have been a part of this effort, not just to speak about it and to gather together, not just friends on the Hill, but the cobbling of ideas as they move around the world and to address this in a way that has a larger voice. That is what you represent. And the people back in Texas who are soundly and firmly committed, not just the United States of America, a country that they've come to, but the ideals and principles that we stand for. So I want to say to you today, your leadership up here, your outreach up here, your speaking to every single member of Congress about not just your ideas, but really a recognition that if we work together over time, we will overcome this. And while we well remember some things that are painful in our past, one of them that we do come back with is data and information is important. It's my hope that you will recognize that not just myself or Congressman Brad Sherman or Congressman Don Bacon, who really has a specialized understanding in particular about the evils of the Iranian leadership and the messages of destruction and trying to cause chaos around the world. But as he served our United States Air Force, our United States military, he saw firsthand about keeping an eye on them and what that would mean. I think all these are shared experiences. I encourage you to continue being on the Hill. Lastly, it's not just Nasser, it's many of you. You need to know your member of Congress, and they need to know you. They need to know you by name. They need to know what you're doing. They need to know that you are organizing back home to keep alive not only this content that we have been doing for all these years, but that ask them to join you also. So today, thank you. Thank you very much for not only showing up here, but for lending your voice and your support and your prayers for what will be a long-term effort to make sure that the world sees the Iranian leadership for what they are, and that is more than thugs. They are trying to destabilize the modern world. They are trying to throw us back to the same thing that we know the Taliban has done in their own way, and that is to repress the rights of women, of free people, and perhaps, worst of all, to kill you for what you believe. And that is a crime against not just civility, but it's a crime, and they will pay the price for it, and we'll make sure. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Sessions. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, a member of Congress who's been with us on many resolutions, including this 1148, House Resolution 1148. Please welcome Congressman Don Baker. Thank you.
appreciate it. Hey, good morning. I think it's a good morning for about another 15 minutes. But I want to welcome you to our nation's capital. Just think about we live in the oldest democracy in the world. What's our dream? That Iran will someday be the newest democracy in the world. That's our vision. We want a free and democratic Iran. We want a secular Iran, and we hope for a country that's nuclear-free Iran, that's at peace with its neighbors. I was in the Air Force for 30 years, so I'm serving in my 8th year in Congress on the Armed Services Committee. It is so clear to me that the regime is our sworn enemy. They say it. You know, they want to defeat America in the Middle East and weaken us here at home. And yet we have too many folks in our country that think we can reach out to and make peace with this regime. We cannot. They are not interested in peace with America or its neighbors. They want to be the regional hegemon in the Middle East, and they want us out. Our values are totally contrary to the regime's values. But we should always stress it's the regime. It's not the Iranian people. When you look at all the data out there, the Iranian people are the most pro-Western, pro-democratic in their heart and their desires. So the key is ultimately, thank you, ma'am, I see you clapping. So that is our goal. We want to help the people reclaim their country. We want the Iranians to live in a place where they don't have to live in fear of their government. Now, the Iranian government creates terror throughout the whole region. In fact, they've been in our country trying to assassinate people. They want to conduct terrorism here. But they also conduct terrorism against their own people, the Iranian people. And they're the enemy of the Iranian people, this regime. So it would be my thought is our leadership, and we've wavered on this at times, we should be clear-eyed. Who is our enemy? It's the government, not the people, it is the government. And we should not take, it's going to sound crude, but we should not take our foot off of the regime's neck. That means we got to be hard on sanctions. Don't release that relief valve at all. Be as tight as we can. Clamp down on all their oil exports. Starve them of money. Our current administration keeps sending them money and trying to provide some relief on sanctions. That money goes right into terror. It props up the regime. So if I could write the policy, I would say not a penny goes to Iran, and we're going to squeeze them economically as hard as we can. And then we got to work with our allies to help counter their nefarious influence. They are indeed the #1 exporter of terror. And they are operating in Iraq, Yemen, all over the Middle East. We go over almost every country. There's these proxy groups that report to the Iranian regime, and we got to help our friends and our allies defeat these guys. Starting off, the Hamas in Israel. Hamas has been armed, funded by Iran. And so we should be clear-eyed about that as well. So our vision, stand by the Iranian people, put pressure on the government, make them weak, support our allies. And in the end, someday, we'll have a free, democratic, secular, nuclear-free Iran that's at peace with its neighbors. So that's our dream. Our dream there. And our dream is, too, to one day have a friendship between our two countries. I miss that. They've been our adversaries since 1979. I look forward to being back to the day where there could be a friendship between our two governments. I also just want to point out, I've had the joy of meeting so many different Iranian Americans the last 6 months. This is what makes our country special. We get wonderful, capable, skilled, and genius, innovative people from all over the world who are American. And the Iranian Americans have made us a better country. So I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman Bacon. As you said, the goal is to help the Iranian people to achieve freedom, democracy, and achieve that non-nuclear secular republic Iran, just as it's been reflected in the 10-point plan by Maryam Rajavi. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, someone who has been with the late Congressman John Lewis, who has always talked about getting into good trouble. And this member of Congress is one of those brave leaders who has never wavered when it comes to standing up with the Iranian people, their call for freedom, democracy, and human rights. My pleasure to introduce Congressman Danny Davis. Congressman Davis, we are so pleased to have you with us today, and we are so pleased that you actually had the opportunity to join us in the annual gathering in Paris and meeting Mariam Rajavi. Thank you again, Congressman.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much, and thank you for your warm welcome. The mention of trouble invokes to me thinking from one of my philosophical leaders that I always adhere to, and that was a fellow named Frederick Douglass. And Douglass used to say that struggle, strife, and pain are the prerequisites for change. If there is no struggle, then there is no progress. To see all of you in this room this morning at this particular time just reminds me of how important struggle is and how important it is to believe and understand. I am what is called a practicing Christian in terms of my religion and what I believe in my faith. And I'm a Baptist. And at the Baptist church I attend, sometimes we sing a song that says, in times like these, you need an anchor. In times like these, you need a Savior. In times like these, you be sure that your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. And I guess what that really means is that in difficult times like we are experiencing right now, where there is trouble all over the world, there is trouble, but those who have faith and hope and belief, we are being told on Sundays when I go to that little Baptist church that if you would have the faith of a mustard seed and say to yonder's mountain, be moved, then the mountain will move out of the way. And if it does not, then you get yourself some dynamite, some TNT, some nitroglycerin, and blow that sucker away. And blow that sucker away. And so it takes faith, struggle, longevity. Rome was not built in a day. I am what people in the community where I live, I am what is called an activist. And there are people who get involved in active struggle. And they work for about a month, and then they quit. They say, ain't nothing changed. So we've been working on this issue for a month, and everything is the same as it was when we started. Then there are some who might have 2 months. It's important, though, for them to know that they've got to be a distant runner, that the relay doesn't end where it starts, that preparation started a long time ago. I've been reading the Old Testament a great deal lately, trying to understand some of what it contains, but also trying to connect that to what is going on today. I must confess that I have been tremendously impressed with your struggle. Impressed with, I always tell people that the biggest meeting I ever went to in my whole life was outside of Paris. You're talking about a meeting of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. The longest meeting I've ever gone to was that same meeting. There were 55 people speaking, and people sat there the whole time and listened intently, listening with fervor, recognizing that if they could continue and put into action what they were being told and what they believed, that ultimately they can experience the freedom that they are seeking. As a matter of fact, we sing another song that says, "Freedom, oh freedom over me. Before I would be a slave, I'll be dead and buried in my grave and gone home to my Lord to be free." So I applaud your struggle for freedom, your struggle for independence, your willingness to sacrifice, your willingness to give all that you've got, never giving up, knowing that if you continue in the struggle, ultimately you will rejoice in the victory. So I join with you in your efforts. I applaud the tenacity with which you continue to work and struggle and approach. And I do believe that in the end, all of us can say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Congressman Davis. Such inspiring words. Free at last, free at last. This is essentially is capturing the moment for change in Iran, capturing the struggle, the very struggle that Congressman was just talking about. Over the last 4 decades, the Iranian people have paid the heaviest price. The Iranian people have withstood the pressure, and they have not given up for a free and democratic Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are waiting for more members of Congress, I want to take a minute to share with you some of the highlights of the resolution that is introduced today by more than 145 members of Congress. This is the strongest bipartisan resolution that's been introduced, which is very different than other resolutions that are being discussed this week because of the fact that it offers a very explicit and specific policy to the White House and to the administration. This bipartisan support and the solution has garnered considerable backing, emphasizing on a unified approach addressing the challenges posed by the Iranian regime, particularly in the regional instability and terrorism. It does not allow for any more half measures. It really emphasizes the message that the resolution explicitly calls that there is no need for military intervention or significant financial aid. Instead, it emphasizes empowering the Iranian people and their organized resistance seeking a democratic change from within. This is a point that Maryam Rajavi was also bringing up at the beginning of the event today, that it is up to the Iranian people who are willing to sacrifice and struggle for freedom, and it is the resistance units that are going to bring this regime down. It also identifies the regime's vulnerabilities. It highlights the internal weakness of the Iranian regime, identifying strategic vulnerability that can and should be targeted through sanctions and through snapback mechanism, just as Mrs. Rajavi was alluding to earlier. More importantly, I think this resolution also talks about protection and the support of those who are fighting on the front line of the resistance. The resolution underlines the importance and the protection of the people based in Camp Ashraf 3 in Albania, acknowledging that their crucial role in really promoting peace and democracy, and more importantly, the testimonies of them who are witnesses of the heinous crimes of the Iranian regime for the sake of accountability and for the sake of peace and stability in the region. This resolution is aligned with the vision that is outlined by Maryam Rajavi, the 10-point plan. And I think this is the qualifying difference between this resolution and other bills that are being introduced in Congress this week when it comes to dealing with Iran. The very 10-point plan that Congressman Weber was talking about, which includes commitment to free and fair elections, free market economy, separation of church and state, equality across all gender, religious, and ethnic groups and the different Iranian nationalities, and the coexistence, peaceful coexistence with its neighbors. This is what the future of Iran holds, and this is what Congressman Danny Davis was just talking about in terms of free at last. This is the struggle for this vision of Iran that the Iranian people are fighting for. The special attention that's given to the rights of the political refugees in Ashraf 3 was highlighted in this resolution, and it really calls for ensuring that they receive protection from potential threats by the Iranian regime. Congressman Lance Gooden, Congressman Weber, and Congressman McClintock all spoke about this very important issue. And then, of course, the resolution supports the rights of the Iranian people and the resistance unit to actively confront the Iranian regime and the IRGC and their oppressive elements within the regime, highlighting the legitimacy of their struggle for freedom and change. This resolution marks a significant reorientation of U.S. policy focusing on moral and political support for the Iranian people and their resistance without resorting to military intervention. This reflects a strategic and a value-driven approach to one of the most pressing foreign policy issues that faces the United States of America today and Europe as a whole. So with that, I'd like to also specifically outline items from the resolution, which is as follows. I'm reading verbatim from the resolution language. It has an impressive number of bipartisan original co-sponsors who offer tangible steps as a solution to deal with the Iranian regime's terrorism as a head of snake of war and terror in the region. I think Congressman Weber was talking about how the terror actually began at home. The Iranian regime unleashed its terrorism on the Iranian people first, and then expanded to the regional terror through their hegemonic vision for the region. And this is what the resolution is calling for. This resolution does not suggest putting boots on the ground or appropriating money or resources. Instead, it focuses on U.S. steps to empower those who are seeking change for freedom in Iran. It highlights the internal weakness of the Iranian regime and its Achilles heel, which is the people of Iran and the resistance units. Iranian regime's weakness is very evident when it comes to holding the sham elections, as we see today, against the 104 members of the Iranian opposition, including those in Albania and the rest of Europe. This shows their insecurity, just as Congressman McClintock mentioned. This shows their vulnerability and how fearful they are of the Iranian opposition, the agents for change inside Iran. The resolution also focuses on the strength and the commitment and the goal of the organized resistance as the biggest ally of the United States and calls for their full protection while the Iranian regime has been stepping up their effort to eliminate. One of the measures and the indicator of escalation is the number of executions that has taken place in 2023, just as Maryam Rajavi mentioned earlier. The resolution emphasizes the desire of the Iranian people, as manifested in Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan for a future of Iran. The president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and her plan stands for universal rights to vote, free elections, as I mentioned, free market economy, separation of church and state, and all of the international covenants, including Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that really secures gender, religious, and ethnic equalities, peace in the Middle East, and a non-nuclear Iran. The resolution calls for the protection of those in Albania, where there are 3,000 Iranian political refugees, calls for their security, protection of property, as well as freedom of expression and assembly. And one thing we have to remember, of the 3,000 people based in Albania, 900 of them are former political prisoners who have faced the tortures, who have faced the unspeakable crimes by the Iranian regime, and they have witnessed the crimes by this regime, and they reserve and deserve the right to hold this regime accountable, and we must protect them. So our goal through this resolution is to make sure that the Iranian regimes, or as we call the head of snake's hand, is cut off from Albania, from the region, and against the people of Iran inside the country, particularly the resistance units. So at this point, let me also recognize the role of the Iranian-American leaders. This resolution, as Congressman Sessions mentioned, is really a culmination of joint effort between the Iranian Americans across the United States, as well as their members of Congress. And we proudly stand here declaring the bipartisan support for the language of this resolution. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Nasser Sharif, the head of the Iranian American community from California.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Iranian American community in California hosting the largest Iranian American community in the U.S. And we're very proud to sponsoring this resolution. And our community worked really hard to reach out to our members. And last 40 years, we're educating the public and our policymakers about what's going on in Iran. And for the last 40 years, we always mentioned that the head of the snake is in Iran, and that needs to be dealt with. So in this resolution, the significant thing about this resolution is showing the path forward, offering a solution which is changed by Iranian people and their organized resistance. So I'm sure the next few days you're going to see many resolutions that condemning Iranian regime's terrorism. But this one is showing the path forward and offering a solution. And we're very proud to sponsor that, and our community members across California reach to their members, talking to the community, and brought a lot of support for this resolution. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharif. Let me also take a moment to recognize the role of the Organization of Iranian American Communities, OIAC. It's my great pleasure to introduce the political director of OIAC, who has really been on the forefront in helping raising the awareness on the importance of Iran policy. So please welcome Dr. Majid Sadehpour.
Thank you all for being here, members of the media, staff, members of the Iranian American community. We put the program together to give a podium to members of Congress to talk about House Resolution 1148, but more importantly, talk about Iran and the solution. We are not here to talk about the threat that Iran has. That is fairly understood by members of Congress and now the American people. What is not understood is the solution, and the resolution highlights that very fact. The solution thus far is that the Iranian people have, not just recently, but since 1981, had an organized opposition movement that has withstood one of the most barbaric regimes that mankind has witnessed over the past 4 decades, has introduced a plan for a future of Iran that is Jeffersonian in nature, that aspires to bring to Iran a democratic republic where the people and the ballot box speaks. Now, the plan we are speaking about has been introduced. We see a copy of it here with us by Madam Rajavi, the 10-point plan that explains didactically the National Council of Resistance of Iran's structure for a Jeffersonian transitional government in Iran, affording the Iranian people the opportunity to vote at one day. When that day comes, we have full faith in the Iranian people's aspirations for that secular republic. That is what the Iranian people have tried to accomplish over the past century, led by their women. And it is not accidental that a woman leads the Iranian resistance. So here Congress goes in detail, not just outlining what the regime has done wrong, but introducing for the first time unequivocal support for the Iranian people's desire, and let's say it, to accomplish regime change. The people of Iran are not dying at highest per capita execution rate in the world to change the regime's behavior. The Iranian people are fighting for regime change. They want this establishment gone in its entirety. And so for so long as the international community engages in conflict with that aspiration, the U.S. policy, the international policy towards Iran will fail. Here, bipartisan members of Congress are saying, let's align the U.S. policy with the wishes and the aspirations of the Iranian people. And the way to do that is to first and foremost recognize their desire for that change. It is no longer a taboo term to demand regime change. But that change is not going to come by a foreign power from abroad, by bombs falling on Iran from abroad. It will not come by money. It will only come by our boots on the ground that are already there, the Iranian kids, the youth, the women. It is those youth that, despite it all, while the world is at its knees trying to contain this threat, have the courage to go after this regime. Not one day, not 2 days, but for 42 years. It is impossible in a free democracy almost. It is very costly at the minimum to organize a few protests in 2 parts of the same city where individuals can chant the same songs, can have the same signs, can show up about the same time, can get home safely, that they're protected from predators, that they have a ride back home, and if they're wet, they're kept dry by the organizers. They're fed at lunchtime or whatever it may be. We would be hard-pressed to maintain that here in Washington, D.C., in 2 areas of town for a week. I would say at a minimum that would be very costly to do, regardless of if it is an agency or an organization or a company. But yet, some folks suggest that the Iranian people's uprising is without leader. They're wrong. Let's use that example. For September 16th of 2022, Mahsa Amini passed away, was killed, and ignited a protest movement in Iran again. Literally 6 days later, September 24th, 2022, uprisings began in Iran the way me and you remember it. And that protest movement was not in the streets of Washington, D.C. It was in a highly oppressive environment in Iran, a police state. Every tree has a sensor on it. Every camera in every corner of every city. These protests were not in one city, were not in 2 cities, they were in more than 280 cities across a country 5 times the size of Texas. And yet these kids, these girls, these women showed up every day, bled. They weren't walking in democracy. They didn't know how to ride to get there. They showed up, they took bullets, they saw the dismembered and raped bodies of their comrades the following morning when they showed up on the street. They took bullets from the rooftops, they took machetes, they were chased down the alleyways. But they nevertheless showed up every day from September 24th, 2022, all the way to almost end of February 2023. That's a long time, folks. Without an organized movement, they would not be able to show up every day. They would not be able to have shelter. They would not have to have a ride to get where they're going. So what we're saying, what House Resolution 1148 is telling us, let's support the Iranian resistance. Let's not pretend this regime is changeable. The Iranian people squared with this regime 41 years ago. That is when the National Council of Resistance of Iran was formed. So we're here to thank the members of Congress. We thank you for being here as we wait and consume our lunch. I want personally, on behalf of myself and the entire organization, thank you all for listening to us. We ask you and urge you to speak with your members of Congress and to perpetuate this thought process that the Iranian people have a resistance movement. It is organized, it is capable, it has a plan, and a free, prosperous Iran is on the horizon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sadeqpour. As you said, it's really important, and I'm addressing the staffers in the room, as you go back to your offices, think about the conversation that took place in this room. The fact that we have a House Resolution 1148 that is calling for a regime change in Iran, but it doesn't leave the conversation there. It actually tells you that there is an alternative to the Iranian regime. There is a democratic, secular alternative that stands for a non-nuclear republic Iran. And that alternative did not just come about yesterday after the death of Mahsa Amini. It was not manufactured by the Iranian regime. It's been an alternative that has been there from early 1980s and continued despite all the hardship, despite all the terrors and the political plots against this alternative, has thrived and has grown over the years. And that alternative is culminated in the 10-point plan of Maryam Rajavi. And this is the reason why the leaders of the Iranian American community continue to be very focused, very diligent when it comes to the message of democracy and freedom in Iran. We are not only going to settle for a non-nuclear Iran. We are not going to only settle for a secular Iran. We are not going to only settle for democracy, but we are going to settle for a non-nuclear, secular republic where the people's vote, not which family they were born into, not the monarchies, not the theocracy, but it's the people's vote. What comes out of the ballot box determines the future of Iran. The independence of the Iranian resistance movement, the self-determination of the Iranian people should be a message that you carry back to your offices. And that's the message we should celebrate and has been celebrated through this House Resolution 1148. So with that, let me introduce our next leader of the Iranian American community, Dr. Homaira Hesami, who's joining us from Iranian American community of Texas. Please welcome Dr. Hesami.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Homaira Hesami, and I'm coming from Texas, representing the Iranian American community of North Texas. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about our organization back in Texas and tell you that we've been in the state and the city for decades. You know, our organization is not just something that was put together to celebrate like New Year's or things like that. You know, we've been involved with the human rights from long time ago. A lot of us have been directly victim of the Iranian regime, so talking to our members of Congress is a passion for us. It's the way that we can express our feelings, our frustration, and our story, and share the story with the representatives. And that's why we are a grassroots organization. And as I said, you know, we are all full-time, have our full-time jobs, but defending human rights is a passion for us. And when I look at the resolution 1148 and such a huge bipartisan support from members of Congress from both Democrats and Republicans, it gives us encourages us, inspires all of us to do more, because every single items of this resolution is the history of all of us. When we have, you know, such a great timing for this resolution as well, because this resolution offers a solution, a practical solution, as a viable alternative to the chaos that is going on in the region right now. The regime, you know, we can condemn the regime years after years, but the thing that you have to do, be practical. You have to have an alternative. What do we do with the regime? You know, condemnation is not enough. So this resolution offers that alternative. And it's the 10-point plan. You know, we don't want it to make it general. It shouldn't be general statement, because general statement is like, yeah, we condemn the regime and we need democracy in Iran. But how do we accomplish that one? How do we get there? So that's where it's really important for our community, and we're really advocating for this. And I want you to take that to the offices over here, that this is the way to go. The Iranian regime has, the main enemy of the Iranian regime is the Iranian resistance. You know, the regime tries to portray that there's so many enemies outside, like it says down with the U.S., down with Israel, all this stuff. But the real main threat to the Iranian regime is the Iranian people and the resistance. So we are all supporting this alternative 10-point plan of Iranian resistance, which calls for the freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, gender equality, non-nuclear Iran, which coexists with its neighbors in peace and tranquility. So we are supporting this resolution, and I wanted to emphasize that because we have such a deep-root struggle in freedom and democracy, we believe that we are going to get to that point. We're going to see a free Iran that is secular, democratic, non-nuclear republic in Iran, hopefully very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Homaira. I remember in the recent Iranian convention that we had, you spoke about your story as a former political prisoner and what you saw in prison, and how proudly you were speaking that I am no longer a victim, I am not just a survivor, I am an empowered leader of the Iranian American community who is now in Texas fighting for democracy and freedom, and we will not forget what happened to our people in Iran. It is my amazing pleasure to introduce our next speaker, also a former political prisoner from Iran. She is a member of the Iranian American community in Virginia, a leader of the local communities, and has been on the issue of human rights and women's rights. Please welcome Ms. Shirin Nariman.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here, attending this reception to announce this wonderful resolution. The part that relates to me and it's based on my passion is I'm a former political prisoner. I was in prison for 2 years at age 17. And unfortunately, I had to witness many of my friends being tortured, executed. And you forget things that happens to you. You forget your tortures. Buried in the ground or playing the Russian roulette in your head. What you never forget is your friends. The moments that you said goodbye to your friends, the last goodbye, and they were executed. They were taken, their name was called in, and they were taken to behind the walls, and they were executing them. And you counted the coup de grace just to know how many people were executed that night. So that was the nightly routine for me. I was very lucky to end up landing in America. However, in summer of 1988, that was when I just had arrived to America, and I heard about the summer of 1988. Many of my friends and relatives were executed in that summer. Many of you may not know, but do a search. You can do a Google search and you see. Within 8 to 10 weeks, around 30,000 people were executed. Many of the prisons didn't have even one survivor. Smaller cities, nobody survived. In Tehran, which is the capital and the surrounding, Gohardash, not even one woman survived. Every single one of them were executed. And that moment, I decided that this is my mission. That's why I'm here. I have to walk in these corridors and talk about Iran. And I remember, thank you. And I remember when we went to knock on the doors of many offices and we talked about Iran, the danger of Iran and what the regime is capable of doing it. Nobody believed us, or not many people believed us. So it took a long time, knocking so many doors in so many years, talking to everyone, and now the whole world understands the danger of Iran. As we say, and as our leader, Mr. and Mrs. Rajabi have said it many times, the head of a snake is sitting in Tehran. And that's what we need to focus. We are here to amplify the voice of people that didn't have the opportunity to be alive and to be here. We are here to continue a fight, to amplify the voice of people who are asking and want the regime change in Iran. Iranian people want the regime change. Nobody is supporting the regime. And it is our duty to make sure that that voice is heard loud and clear in everywhere around the world. And I know many of my friends, many of Iranian Americans that are sitting here and outside, they have been fighting for the freedom, for democracy. But it is important to make the right decision. Everything in this resolution has outlined that. It talks about the safety of the Camp Ashraf. Many of my cellmates, though not many of them have survived, but right now they are in Camp Ashraf, and I'm afraid that something terrible would happen. The threat of Iranian regime is real, and their lives is not safe. So that's why we have to work hard to make sure that those who survived, which they are live history, is a history of Iran, and is something that can guarantee democracy in the future, because these people can come in and, they were witness, so they can, in the courts, international tribunal, they can come in and talk about what happened during 1980s. So in this resolution, it talks about the safety of those people. Also, what is the solution? What is the key? if this regime falls today? Who would be the leading the opposition? And to me, Madam Rajavi is the biggest leader and biggest feminist in the world, because she has been able to fight for 45 years. The fight of Iranian people didn't start yesterday or 2022. It's been going on for more than 40 years. And the person that is leading that is Maryam Rajavi, and she has a 10-point plan. She's outlining the future of Iran, what she wants for Iran: equality, freedom, democracy, secular regime. And that's why, with all my passion, I'm following her, and I want her to make sure that more and more people would sign this resolution. And the new another uprising is on the verge. So we would make sure that we don't allow opportunists like, the ex-prince of Iran that is trying to show that he's there, but he always is so passionate for IRGC than, for Iranian people. We have to make sure that this time the regime change happens by the Iranian people, for the Iranian people, and for the bright future for a secular democratic Republic of Iran. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shireen. And thank you for your continued work and effort to be outspoken on the issue of human rights and providing your own personal story and experience. Shireen spoke about 1988 massacre. Among our community members, we have relatives of those who were executed during the summer of 1988. At this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Gholam Torshrizi to share with us his story about his brothers and how they were victimized in the summer of 88, with Khomeini issued a fatwa to kill more than 30,000 political prisoners just because they will not renounce or denounce their affiliation with the MEK, Mujahideen Khalq. Please welcome Mr. Gholam Torshrizi.
Thank you so very much. I'm the only surviving son of Ali and Aqdas Torshizi family. What happened in 1976, I came to United States to further my education, and I studied physics. My other brothers, Behruz, Reza, and Bahman Torshizi, they were studying in Iran. When the revolution was successful, I went back to help to build the country. And unfortunately, what happened, we call it the spring of freedom, passed so rapidly. My younger brother, Behruz, he was against some of the policies of the new regime. And what he did, he was taking pictures of demonstrations. And one day he did not come home, and we were looking everywhere for him. After 17 days, to our surprise, we noticed that he has been executed for the crime of taking pictures of demonstrations. My other brother, Bahman, he was also taking pictures, making documentaries, and he vanished. And we did not know what happened to him. My other brother, Reza, he was worried about my other brothers, so he was searching for them with my mother, that he got arrested. And they took my mother and my brother to Evin prison. After 1 month, they released my mother, but my brother stayed in prison. And they gave him 7 years in prison. In the summer of 1988, his sentence was over, and he was supposed to be released. My father goes to the authorities and asks for my brother's release. And they say that his release is in his own hand. He must repent. So my father goes to my brother and asks him, you need to repent to get out. and this is shocking. My brother told my father that, Dad, it's not that easy. They have divided the prisoners in 2 camps. And they say, if you want us to believe that you are genuinely repenting, you need to kill the other prisoners. And I cannot do that. This is the story of 1988 massacre. So after a few days, they called my dad and they say, come and take his belongings. And to our surprise, they killed my brother. It is not then, because one person who was responsible for my brother's death is the current president, Ebrahim Raisi. They had a committee of 4 people who decide who repent or who is not repenting, and if you don't repent, they issue your death sentence. So for me, 1988 is still going on because the murderer, Ebrahim Raisi, is the president of Iran right now. And this resolution is the answer for the Iranian people that this regime must go. We need a better regime. And the 10-point plan of Mrs. Maryam Rajavi is the answer, is a secular republic of Iran. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torshrizi. You know, the issue of 1988 is an important issue because of the accountability, the crimes against humanity that was committed against the members of the MEK in that summer is not subject to time. It could be, all those, including Ebrahim Raisi, can be held accountable. And in fact, in Sweden, some of the people who were involved in the prison and the execution during that period were arrested under the universal jurisdiction. They faced a trial, a fair trial, where there were numerous witnesses pointed him where he was at the scene of the crime and the crime that he committed. And I'm talking about Hamid Nouri. And despite the fact that the Iranian regime tried to water down his role in the 88 massacre, he was one of the players that actually conducted the killing, while Ebrahim Raisi was part of the panel that was essentially issuing the death decree against the loved ones of the people like Mr. Torshrizi. So it's really important for us that just because it happened in the past, it doesn't mean the crimes have stopped. It doesn't mean the accountability is not achievable. We could still hold them accountable. And that's what's important about justice, peace, and accountability when it comes to the Iranian resistance and the movement for change in Iran. So I thank you all so much. We are still expecting more members of Congress to join us. I heard that there is a markup, and obviously, as you can imagine, this is a very, very busy week with all of the committee meetings. We will be still waiting for members of Congress until 1 p.m. today, but I would encourage you to use this opportunity to network and meet with your community members, meet with the staffers from the members of Congress while we're waiting for other members to join us. Thank you so much.
that? No, he's taking a picture. He'll send it to me.
Temporary history. Under the Shah's dictatorship, women were executed in the struggle against it. Marzia Skui, Fatemeh Amini, Mehnoush Ebrahimi, Behjat Tiftakchi, Shirin Moazed. Women in a struggle against Khomeini. From the onset, Khomeini waged war on women with the infamous slogan of either the veil or a beating on the head. But Iranian women also fought back with their massive demonstration, while the PMI women and girls were at the forefront defending the protesters on that day. In 1979 in Shiraz, Nasrin Rostami, a young PMI supporter, died after being shot by Revolutionary Guards. The clerical regime started slaughtering the PMI members and sympathizers, including young girls, in the aftermath of the June 20th, 1981 peaceful demonstrations. Even teenage girls who had refused to give their names to the Revolutionary Guards were executed without establishing their identities. And other women who, after years of torture in the Shah's prisons, were executed by the Mullah's regime. Masume Shadmani or Mother Kabiri, Ashraf Rajavi, and dozens of other female freedom fighters. Quite a few PMI women gave birth to their children in Khomeini's dungeons. The struggle of PMI women in the regime's jails has continued for the last 4 decades. Maryam Akbari Monfared was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2009 for supporting the PMI. Additionally, 3 of her brothers and 1 sister were executed by the Mullah's regime for their support of the PMI. After enduring torture, Maryam was banished to the prison of Semnan and was subsequently sentenced to 3 more years in prison. Another crime attributed to her is seeking justice through legal action against her executed siblings in the massacre of political prisoners in 1988 by the Mullah's regime. Maryam Akbari Monfared wrote in a letter, "We are seeking justice and insisting on justice in the hope that no more families would have to mourn their children. We have lived through the terrible and torturous decade of the 1980s. That's why we are thinking of and seeking justice so that the future generations of Iran would not have such a terrible experience." In another letter, Maryam Akbari Monfared wrote, "The 1988 massacre is ongoing. The execution and killings of innocent people are the continuation of that massacre. The killing of protesters in 2009, 2017, and 2019 is the continuation of the 1988 massacre. Persisting on the call for justice for the victims of the 1988 massacre is identical to the struggle for freedom." The Mullah's judiciary arrested Masume Yavari in Golpaigan, Isfahan, on the 12th of December 2023 on charges of membership in the PMY. They sentenced her to 13 years of imprisonment. Marzieh Farsi, 56 years old, a mother of 2 children, and the sister of a slain PMY member, Hassan Farsi, has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Forough Taghipour, 29 years old, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She was arrested in February 2020 for her ties to the PMY. She was released in February 2023 after 3 years of imprisonment, but was re-arrested on the 23rd of August 2023 in Tehran. Nasim Gholami was arrested in September 2023 for supporting the PMY. She has been accused of baghi or armed insurgency, a charge that is punishable with execution, amputation of limbs, or long prison sentences. Despite the incarcerations, tortures, pain and anguish, the women of Iran are determined to continue their struggle to the end to achieve freedom.
اینا